Hey everyone, this is Mayan Gordon, and I have a really special guest here today. His name is Jesse Johnson, and he's a really highly accomplished business owner, owns multiple 6 to 7 figure businesses over his past career, and he's also a single father of 6. Now, you might be thinking that these two things don't really go together, being a single father of 6 and being a multiple accomplished business owner. But here he is to share some of his wisdom with us. In addition to that, he's helped eliminate over $4 million worth of debt through paid and unpaid consultations. Jesse, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Awesome. I'm doing really, really great. So we're here to talk about what it means to be a champion. And clearly you have championed a lot of your causes. What is it that drives you to be so passionate and to champion pretty much everything that you undertake in your life?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. And I even the word champion means so deep to me that I've labeled a company after it, which is my coaching business. But for me, it all starts when I really got my value system and my long-term vision planned for my life. And I was really blessed. I had some people come into my life at a really young age and ask me some tough questions about at the end of my life, what do I want to be remembered for? What is it that I want my life to stand for? How do I really want it to look like when I'm living? And from there, I just decided that my ultimate goal in life was to teach over 250,000 people to be people of integrity and to be proactive in their own life. And what I meant by that was to literally be pros at activities that lead to integrity in its definition of whole and complete. So spiritually, socially, emotionally, physically, and financially. And so although it wasn't really well formed all the time, I identified my value system and then started to manage my decisions based on that. And does it get me closer to that goal, further away from it? How do I filter the relationships in my life so that I was able to, when it came to questions like, hey, should I adopt these kids and whatnot, the answer was yes, because it aligned with my value system. And when it comes down to even interviews or clients that I take on, does it get me closer to that impact goal? And how do I lead leaders that influence change within a community? So
that's amazing. So it sounds like you've almost been able to simplify a very complex life through your value system and using that as a filter for all the choices that you make from the macro to the micro. Is that kind of how you describe it?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. And that's where, what I try to do with everybody that I work with, whether they're friends or clients or of any kind, is just help them build better filters to make confident decisions in their life towards whatever the end goal that they want is. Which starts with clarifying it. I was just blessed that I sat down, took the time, had the tough conversations to clarify the general direction I wanted it to be early on.
So that leads me into a question. Where do you think a lot of that confidence comes from? Do you think it directly comes from the clarity, or is there somewhere else that you're also kind of gaining a very high level of confidence to be able to execute on so many different levels?
Yeah, I think part of it does start with clarity, but then it's action, right? And then it's, you'll hear me say this often, that your intuition comes from your repetition. And every once in a while, we get lulled into this belief that practice makes perfect, when in reality, practice makes permanent. And so if you can practice the right things, then you're going to get the right kind of results. And like for me, in that, I've just got a lot of reps of falling down in my entrepreneurial journey. Like my story, I ended up owning my first traditional business when I was 20, and I had no idea about P&L statements. I didn't know how to manage payroll, how to build a leadership team. I had no idea about any of that, but you figure it out. And I was in that phase of designing what kind of life do I really want my end goal to be. And I just took intentional steps towards that every day and kept improving and optimizing and growing. And that clarity really helps me make some pretty difficult decisions. And I think that's a lot of people, especially in whether it's business partnerships or relationships, they struggle because they don't have that clearly defined vision. So when it comes to, should we expand into a new market, or in a family, should we buy a new home?
Right. No,
yeah.
Yeah, it's very hard to, I would say, know what the right decision to make sometimes is when 3 or 4 of the choices that you have seem like they could be great ideas. And oftentimes they could be great ideas depending on what your actual goals are. And without having that kind of North Star goal to guide you, I think it's very easy to kind of get off track from where you really want to be based on like what you feel in your heart, what you really feel in your soul. So it's really cool to hear that that's been something you've been able to do from the get-go. And it sounds like from people who asked you questions in your life. So like you had your own sort of mentors and champions who were able to be there for you. Could you talk a little bit about that and how how important you feel that has been or hasn't been?
Yeah, well, it's funny because we undervalue our association. And all too often, our association is based on proximity. So one of the key determining factors actually of your belief system and the way that you think early on in life is dictated by the first letter of your last name that puts you on a school roster list that puts you in the desk next to a certain kid or next to
Ah,
a certain person. And then because of just proximity and interaction, you start to build relationships with these people. You play sports with these people, you go to clubs with these people. It's your coworkers that you're in the cubicle next to or that you work with day in and day out. And that's what shapes your value system. And all too often, we're not intentional about that. I knew that my best thinking got me to where I was at. And if I was going to level that up, I needed to level up my association. And part
yeah,
of
no, I mean, I can completely relate to that. Certainly in the past year for me, especially from being on LinkedIn specifically, being able to surround myself with people who are much, much more ambitious than the people I've been hanging out with, people who have that drive to accomplish more, to seek out information and ask questions has incredibly helped me to ask better questions of myself, has helped me to be more ambitious in the areas that are really aligned with my values. So I think that's really cool to hear. I want to ask, how are you able to accomplish being a single father of 6 and running multiple businesses and staying happy and sane all at the same time? Because that's a lot. I mean, I'm getting ready, hopefully in the next year or two, to have my first kid, and I think even just one's going to be a crazy kind of, a mess, so to speak. So how do you get through? How do you keep things organized? And how do you keep it all sane and happy and put together?
Man, that is a big question. But I'll tackle it the best that I can. So I went from a 20-year-old single guy to a father of 4 in 6 months, parenting a 2-year-old, 7, 8-year-old, and a 16-year-old, and then ended up getting married, having some biological children. And I won't get too deep into my story, but it's really just building systems around our values and what we want it to look like. And I made a decision a long time ago that I wanted to lead a generation of my family out of poverty and out of addictions and challenges that a lot of people are facing. So then decision making became simple, whether it was how am I going to parent? Like, what's my parenting style? And then finding the people that had done very well at it and then adopting similar techniques. It also came from relinquishing the need to be perfect because it's never going to be perfect. And I'm okay if my house is a little bit dirtier than other people's, as long as the kids within it know that they're loved, that they're unconditionally, and that they're going to go out into the world and make great decisions. And then the hardest part for me was letting go. Now that my oldest is 18, I have 3-year-old twins as well in the house. And man, it was letting go and knowing that they're going to ultimately have to pick who they're going to listen to and what they're going to do after they're outside of my house. So I had to relinquish all of am I the one that's responsible for it or not? Because they're going to have to pick as they get older. All I can be responsible for is how well am I equipping them? Am I having intentional conversations to ask them questions, to think deeper, to get to a bigger vision for their family? And I'll actually, if I can, I'm going to share a letter I got from
Yeah, please do. That's awesome. We'd love to hear it.
One of the situations, obviously, if you're a single parent, that means that there was probably some dysfunction or a divorce of some kind. And that's never a fun process, and there are multiple reasons for it. And but there was a period of time right after I got divorced, and I was struggling with am I leading my family in the right way? Is my business success hindering my family too much and not on par with the direction I'm trying to go? And you start to ask these questions, and no matter how confident you are, you can doubt.
Yes.
And I got back from hosting a conference, and my kids know why we do what we do. We talk about our values, we talk about our family goals and everything. And I came home, and my bedroom was cleaned, and on it sat a letter from my kids. And I don't know if you can see it, but I'll read it to you. It said, "Dad, we're so thankful for everything you do for us. I know you've been pretty stressed lately. We just want to let you know that your hard work and commitment haven't gone unnoticed. We see the long extra hours you put into work. We see how tired you are after that, yet you still go out and help other families. We see the way you just want to give up sometimes, but after that, we watch you get up and go to the gym. All of us kids have seen you work your butt off, and we know that we're so lucky to have a father like you. Thank you for setting the most amazing example. We hope you get some rest tonight. We decided to clean up your room so you don't have to stress about another thing on your plate. Us kids love you loads. Sleep well tonight and have an amazing trip this weekend. Safe travels, Daddy, and just remember, we see you. Sign the kids. P.S. We respect you as our father, role model, and mentor."
That's amazing. I have to say that's amazing because I think most kids do not realize the positive effect or the positive choices that their parents made for them until after they leave the house. I know certainly my parents did a lot of things for me that I hated them for because I didn't understand why they were making those choices. But afterwards, now I look back and I'm so grateful that they made those choices or, forced me to do those things or ask me those questions and put me in uncomfortable situations that really helped develop me. So that's really cool to hear that they are aware of it. Would you attribute that directly to those conversations that you have with them and kind of the open communication style?
Yeah, and man, I 100% to that, because it's when they don't understand why we do what we do, that's when resentment can build or when there's confusion. And so for me, when I'm working extra hard or I'm doing something, they know what we're doing it for. We're helping people. I get to introduce them to the people that we're helping and clients and things like that so that they become part of the journey. And they know that when I'm doing that, that's what allows us to get the extra time for a week family trip or those kind of
Right.
things.
And they
And,
probably appreciate that more when it's happening too, because they can tie it back to the extra hard work that you did.
and I also, one thing that I really implemented in my family too, that I think has kind of been crucial for that is I lead from rest and I schedule in quality time with each one of my kids so that work doesn't consume the whole month or the whole situation. Now I'm single dad with 6 kids, so I have to meet the physical and emotional needs of the family. So they each get one day a month that is uninterrupted quality time, no cell phones or computers unless that's what they're engaged in wanting to do. But that's where it creates space and room to have those conversations about tough topics that maybe they're having a hard time problem solving themselves, about conflict with teachers and whatnot. So it's 100%, but you have to intentionally create the space to invest in those relationships.
That's amazing. So I would say, or my next question really then is, have you seen a direct back and forth between you working on your family structure and then that directly transferring to your business and having positive benefits there? And then vice versa, do you have times when you're working on your business and realize there's a good structure that you can implement then into your family structure?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned that. I've been laughed at by some of the spheres of influence I'm at for having family board meetings weekly, right? Where
Right.
we come together and we talk about calendars and budgeting and all that kind of stuff. But
That's awesome. That's awesome.
there's 100% transfer in it because success principles don't change no matter if it's in your relational dynamics with your family or with business leaders. And once you can prioritize what the most important relationships in your life are, then everything else can become a little bit more simple. And so Parenting with Love and Logic was actually one of the favorite books that I've read that helped me even in leadership dynamics, as the people I was leading weren't following through on their stuff the same way I was leading my children in the house and giving them clear choices for them to make and boundaries to follow, but then logical consequences on the back end.
Right. Very cool. Yeah, I think, a lot of people, either you can relate to Jesse right now as a parent and trying to, not control your kids, but certainly guide them in a direction. So giving up some control, but at the same time, creating systems, processes, structure, space, time, where all those things can come into play. But then also on your business side, having those exact same principles because your employees, your clients are also kind of like your children. And that dynamic is very similar there. And I know that a lot of business owners who are going to watch this are going to feel that same struggle of, wanting their employees, their children to do very, very well, but having to trust them to make their own decisions, having to give them the opportunity and the freedom to explore and make those decisions for themselves. So this leads me into my last question, because I think the word, I'm going to talk a lot about the word champion. I know that word is super meaningful to you, but the word champion applies across every genre, every part of your life in the same way. So what does it mean to you to be a champion in your business, in your family, in your life, just in general?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that because it is true. It fits everything. And I did an exercise a long time ago that was called the one word principle. And John C. Maxwell talks about it in his 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth as a self-image exercise. And he asked the question, if you were to define your life with one word, what would it be? And is that word positive or negative? And then if it's negative, switch it to a positive. And so when I went through that exercise, I picked champion as my term because I wanted it to be that way. And I subsequently launched a coaching business that's called Champion Choices. And a champion, if you were to break it down into an acrostic or an acronym, whatever you want to call it, it's a courageous, honorable, and motivated person inspiring outstanding nobility. And nobility wasn't to me like a position of authority you were born into. It's the ability to be noble and raise the bar to a higher standard of character and a higher standard of excellence in your life. And so I try to remind myself and everybody that I'm around that you get to pick the cause that you're going to want to champion as a verb and then actually champion that cause. But then it's also, in a noun sense, you are an elected official. Back in the day, kings and queens used to elect champions to fight tournaments or wars for the whole nation. And I believe that we individually have a purpose and a calling in our life that we're called the champion, and we were elected to play that role in our family tree and in our country and in our community. So that if we can start to rebuild ourselves from the inside out, start to have that confidence that we can and are capable of championing that cause, then we can rebuild it from our inside to our family unit, from our family unit into our community, from the community into the city, from the city into the state into the country, and then inevitably into the world. And one of the things I've admired about you and your presence on LinkedIn is you're bringing the world closer together. And like with this cause and launching the champion mindset, I think that we're going to start to create some big change in a world that is needing a lot more of that, where people are thinking more about the human connection and what is good and right rather than
Yeah. And and one thing that I really like about the word champion, and one of the reasons it's been really sticking with me, certainly in the past couple months, is because it does really, the definition of it really does center around a fight, a battle. And these things that we all really want in our lives, the causes that we want to champion, we do have to fight for. And life is not easy. It is honestly a struggle a lot of the time. And if you're not built into that system of fighting for what you want, if you're not ready every single day to go out there and battle with all of the obstacles that are going to come and try and stop you from accomplishing your goals, I think it's very hard to win. But if you can instill those habits, if you can build in those processes that truly turn you into a champion, it becomes much easier, at least to go to battle. Maybe it's not easier in battle, but it's certainly easier to go there because you know who you are, you know your strengths, you know yourself, and you know that to be a champion. So thank you so much for taking the time to hop on here, share your story, share some of your insights. If people want to reach out and connect with you, where would they find you and how would they do that?
Yeah, I mean, they can look up my LinkedIn profile. Here is Jesse Johnson. I'm the owner of Champion Choices. So they can do that, or they can reach out. My email is jjohnson@championchoices.net. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me for now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. And everyone, have a great rest of your night.
Great. Thanks.